right, we'll go to in our Bibles to 2 Samuel tonight. We're finally in 2 Samuel and looking at chapter 2. And we have some territory to cover tonight. We're looking at 2 Samuel 2 through 4. Not going to obviously spend time on every single verse here, but trying to get the overall flow of the passage. We're studying the life of David, and we're going to look at the next episode here. We saw last week the tragic end of Saul and the battle of Mount Gilboa, where God removed a corrupted king and did numerous things there on Mount Gilboa. Tonight, we are going to watch two titans clash in these chapters. I read these chapters and thought about these chapters for hours and hours this week. It was one of the more difficult sermons to prepare, because you want to find out what is the point of these chapters and what is the Lord seeking to tell us. If you were to get a broad view of these chapters, you will find that you have two very strong men clashing. Their names are Abner and Joab. And when you have two strong forces clashing, two strong forces, you have a lot of energy. And it reminded me of a thunderstorm. We live in Iowa here, and thunderstorms are a regular occurrence. Wind is also a regular occurrence in Iowa. But thunderstorms, in the summertime in particular, you have these two fronts, cold air and warm air, meet together and they clash, and you have this huge thunderstorm that can do a lot of damage, can do a lot of destruction. And we are looking at a thunderstorm brewing here that appears at first to ruin David's future. But when the clouds part at the end of chapter 4 and into chapter 5, you have a united Israel that is ready to crown David king. And that, if you study the history of Israel and the study of the book of Judges, think of the book of Judges. In those days, there was no king in the land of Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. You have a united Israel now ready to make David king. And it's fascinating. I think as we go through, you'll see just how fascinating it is. My original title for this message was One Step Forward, Two Steps Back. But I'm not sure that's biblical. I thought of that title and I thought, can you take one step forward and two steps back spiritually? If you're not following the Lord, perhaps, yes. But if you're following the Lord, can you take a step backward? I believe God is sovereignly working all things together in David's life for good. And for a person following the Lord, there are no steps backward. Think of this verse, Psalm 37:23. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholdeth him with his hand. Several verses later in Psalm 37:37 says, Mark the blameless man and observe the upright, for the future of that man is peace. What's his destination? The future of that man, where's he going to end up? He's going to end up in peace. All steps of a man that is following the Lord, all steps lead to God's destination. This verse is in our hymnal. Stuart Hamlin wrote these words. He says, My heart can sing when I pause to remember. A heartache here is but a stepping stone along a trail that's winding always upward. This troubled world is not my final home. A heartache here is but a stepping stone. And these three chapters are stepping stones. So we're going to look at three stepping stones in these three chapters. We're going to see that all steps lead to God's destination. We'll learn some other lessons along the way. The first step is in chapter 2, and that is the step of coronation. Coronation. David is crowned king at long last over Judah. We see here that David relocated at God's direction. It says in verse 1, "It happened after this that David inquired of the Lord, saying, 'Shall I go up to any of the cities of Judah?'" Where is he right now when he says this? He's in Ziklag, right? Where is Ziklag? It's still Judah territory, but it was Philistine controlled at that point. David says, should I go up to the cities of Judah at all? The Lord said to him, "Go up." David said, "Where shall I go up?" And he said, "To Hebron." David inquires of the Lord as soon as he had finished mourning for Saul. Inquiring of the Lord is what set David apart from other kings. This man lived with God constantly on his mind, constantly asking the Lord, "What do you want me to do?" I was thinking as we sang that song, "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus." You want a barometer of how much you trust in Jesus? What is your prayer life like? If you look at your prayer life, it's a commentary, it's an open commentary to the Lord of how much you need Him. And so if your prayer life is very small, you don't need the Lord, and consequently you don't depend on Jesus. You're not trusting Jesus. Our prayer life is a barometer of our trust in the Lord. And here's David. Every other verse you have him inquiring of the Lord, looking to the Lord for direction. He needs the Lord. He's instructed to go up to Hebron. Hebron was a city that was given to Caleb. Remember Caleb, the son of Jephunneh? And he is one of the 2 good spies that came into the land of Canaan. He gave a good report of the land, and he was awarded some territory. Hebron was a city that was given to him. It was also known as a city of refuge. A city of refuge was a city where if you had accidentally killed someone, you'd call it manslaughter today, you would run to this city, because there would be the family members perhaps that say he intended to do it, and there was a confusion about who was guilty of the crime, and you would go to the city of refuge, and that was the place where you would look for justice, and they would take your case and they would hear your case. And this city of refuge was a place where the avenger of blood, it says, could not enter. They would not allow anyone to come in and say, "So-and-so is here, he killed my son, he killed my brother, he killed somebody from my family, I demand that you hand him over." They'd say, "We won't hand him over until we hear the case." So it was a city where you could go for refuge when you were being chased after an accidental crime. And Hebron was in Judah's territory as well, the tribe of Judah. So David relocates at God's direction here to Hebron. David is crowned in Hebron as king of Judah. Now, that is a very significant statement. Verse 4, "The men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah." All right, and David, has been anointed already over the whole land of Israel, but he's anointed twice. He's actually going to be anointed 3 times as king over Israel. But here he's anointed as king over Judah. Why is there a division here between Judah and the other tribes of Israel? I want to just take you on a brief little history lesson. You can write some of these references down. If you're super fast in your Bible, you can turn to these references. But there is a division between the tribe of Judah and the rest of the tribes of Israel from long ago. When Saul called Israel to arms early on in his reign, you remember when he came into power, the men of Jabesh Gilead were accosted by Nahash the Ammonite, children of Ammon, and they were at risk of going into slavery to the children of Ammon. And Saul calls all Israel together. He calls them to arms, and we're told that 300,000, in 1 Samuel 11:8, we're told that 300,000 came from Israel and 30,000 came from Judah. Does anybody see an issue with that? 300,000 came from Israel and 30,000 came from Judah. This is 1 Samuel 11:8. So early on in Israel, you have the 11 tribes and you have Judah. Okay? And so there's a differentiation made, there's a difference made here between Judah and Israel. When Saul fought against Amalek, 1 Samuel 15:4, when he fought against Amalek, 200,000 foot soldiers came from Israel and 10,000 came from Judah. 200,000 from Israel, 10,000 come from Judah. This is before the land is like divided, northern kingdom, southern kingdom. We haven't even thought about that yet. David's not even on the throne yet. Saul is hardly on the throne at this point. But you have this division. When David killed Goliath, 1 Samuel 17:52. I'd encourage you to go over there. 1 Samuel 17 and verse 52. This is a very familiar passage. 1 Samuel 17, verse 52. Philistines see their champion is dead. They flee. Verse 52, now the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines. Why does he say Israel and Judah? Because there is this division between them. In the next chapter, 1 Samuel 18, verse 16, when David went into Saul's court, it says, all Israel and Judah loved him. So there is this division between Israel and Judah, and it goes even farther back. You can find it in the book of Judges in the story of the Levite and his concubine. The Levite is actually from Bethlehem in Judah, and he's going to get his concubine in Gibeah, which is the territory of Benjamin. And there's this division between the tribes at this point. And the tribes of Israel have been fragmented. Judah is still fragmented. There's still this division between them. So it's not unusual for Judah to be off doing their own thing. That's my point here, okay? So they anoint David as king. Well, that's Judah. They do their own thing all the time, okay? And so they anoint him as king. And he's king over his tribe. And you say, well, there's so much more there. But think of how it must have been so fulfilling to be recognized as the rightful heir to the throne of somewhere. I mean, here's David he's been running around for years, being chased by King Saul, denied any shelter, denied any provisions whatsoever. Now he's welcomed with open arms by the men of Judah. They anoint him king. He has some sort of lodging in Hebron. We're not told exactly what his lodgings were like, but he reigns there for 7 years. How fulfilling must that have been? He must have felt like, man, this is the stepping stone. This is the first stepping stone, all right? And it's encouraging to him. David, again, had a homeland. It's from here that he learns that the men of Jabesh Gilead, who originally were in danger of being slaves to the Ammonites, had gone and rescued Saul's body. And David speaks to them in verses 5 and 6, and he blesses them. He says to them, middle of verse 5, you are blessed of the Lord, for you have shown this kindness to your Lord, to Saul, and have buried him. And now may the Lord, that is Yahweh, may Jehovah show kindness and truth to you. I also will repay you this kindness, because you have done this thing. Now therefore, verse 7, let your hands be strengthened and be valiant, for your master Saul is dead, and also the house of Judah has anointed me king over them. He is commending these men for their bravery, and he is promising to repay them. This sounds like the words of someone who has the means to do that. He's a man in control of something. He's a man in power. It's also a very diplomatic move, because Jabesh Gilead, you'll remember, is on the east side of the Jordan River, and it's calculated to unify this fragmented nation once again. Think of where Israel has been in recent years. David goes up to Hebron. Israel is still recovering. Do you remember Mount Gilboa last week and the devastation there? And the people around the Jezreel Valley, we'll see a map of it in just a moment, but the people around the Jezreel Valley literally abandoned their homes, abandoned their cities. The Philistines come and they live in the cities, and there's this huge gash in the middle of Israel going into the Jordan River Valley that the Philistines now control. And we're not really sure how long they controlled that, but Israel was fragmented. There was confusion. It was a stunning defeat. And so David reaches out to the men of Jabesh Gilead and is seeking to encourage them, but also seeking to build some ties there. His message, though, is going to be doomed to failure. We'll see in just a moment. But before we get on to that, isn't it nice when the Lord gives us times in our lives when the stepping stones seem to be making sense? It's easy to take a step when it makes sense, right? This is the place I need to go. This is the place I need to be. God gives us those times when things make sense. What are we to do with those times? When God provides, we're to remember those times. We're to rejoice in those times, and we're to remember those times. We're to write those times down. If you do not remember these times when the Lord has blessed you, you will be utterly confused when the harder times come. The song that we just sang, "'Tis So Sweet to Trust in Jesus," the lady that wrote that lost her husband in a tragic drowning accident. Her husband drowned while trying to rescue another person from drowning. And she experienced great physical need. And you think of the words that we just sang, "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus." Just to take Him at His word, just to rest upon His promise, just to know, thus saith the Lord. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust Him. How I've proved Him over and over. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust Him more. Here's a lady who had stored up the times when life made sense, the provisions that God had given to her. She had stored them up. Go to Psalm 42 if you can turn there. Psalm 42 and verse 6. Psalm 42, 6, another psalm of David here. This is the psalm where he says, why are you cast down, O my soul? Why are you disquieted within me? Hope in God. Psalm 42, 6 says, "Oh my God, my soul is cast down within me. Therefore, I will remember you from the land of the Jordan, and from the heights of Hermon, from the hill Mizar. I will remember you from the land of the Jordan, from the heights of Hermon, from the hill Mizar." I will remember you, he says. What is he remembering? He's remembering God's character, how the Lord has shown Himself faithful. And David can run back in his mind through this Rolodex of instances, this journal of instances. I don't guess we use Rolodexes anymore, do we? Can't believe I used that word. But this journal of instances, okay? How many know what a Rolodex is? All right, several. Thank you. Appreciate all 5 of you. There's a little more than that. But this huge journal of instances of faithfulness of God, and he can fuel himself. He said, I will remember you. I'll remember your faithfulness. My soul is cast down, but I remember who you are. I remember your character. Can you do that if you don't remember? That's sort of an obvious question. You can't remember God if you've not stored up those instances, if you've not been looking for the faithfulness of God. Have you ever ignored the fuel warning light on your car? How many of you have ignored the fuel warning light on your car before? Oh, we got some shy folks here. Okay, hands up here. Ignored it. Okay, it dings and you thought, I can get here. I can get a better price than that. That's a terrible price. You know, we're on this side of town. I'm gonna try to get. How many of you have ever been struck on the side of the road because you ignored the fuel warning light in your car? My hand's up again. Okay. Yes. How do you feel at that time? Frazier, how did we feel? Was it Frazier or Torrey? Torrey. Yes, most recent was in front of Menards. How do you feel at that time? What sort of thoughts do you think? Why did I ignore this? Why did I not just get some gas? I saved 20 cents by skipping this, but by skipping that gas station, and now I'm sitting here, I have to spend an hour getting my tank filled up. Do you keep your memory full of God's blessings? Or is that warning light going off right now? Is there a warning light going off in your mind that says, you don't really have a list like that? You don't really keep a journal. If you don't keep a journal, you should keep a journal. You should write down what the Lord is doing in your life, because you say, I'll always remember. No, you won't. We forget all kinds of things. We forgot what we ate yesterday already. You can't remember everything. Write down what the Lord has done for you. Store up the treasures of God's provision in your past. If your warning light is going off right now, don't ignore it, because you will be sitting on the side of the spiritual road someday, and you'll think, I should have wrote those things down. David has just reached a stepping stone here. He is coronated as king of Judah. And that step makes sense, but the next two steps make no sense. But they're not steps backwards. We're going to see they're steps in God's direction. The next step that David is forced to take, the next stepping stone, if you will, that he has to step on is the stone of civil war. You have a coronation, and then you have civil war. Civil war. And here we're introduced once again. We have heard his name in the past, but not a whole lot. Verse 8, but Abner, the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, took Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. And he made him king over Gilead, over the Asherites, over Jezreel, over Ephraim, over Benjamin, and over all Israel. So the Hebrew here starkly shifts the narrative to Abner. It's sort of but. That word but is a common little word in the Hebrew that gets translated many, many different ways. But it's transitioning at this point the narrative from David to his antagonist. And this is Abner. Abner is a strong, strong leader. He takes Ishbosheth, Saul's surviving son. He crowns him king over the remainder of Israel's fragmented tribes. And I want to emphasize fragmented tribes. Where does Ishbosheth reign from? He reigns from this place called Mahanaim. And Mahanaim is on the east side of the Jordan River because the Philistines probably still had this control over the middle of Israel. I'm going to show you a map here of Israel during this time. This is the territory of Ishbosheth and the territory of David. And you see Ishbosheth is on the right there. Mahanaim is his capital. It has a little star there on the right side of the Jordan River. And David's capital is down there in Hebron. And notice in the middle of Ishbosheth's territory, you see this huge swath of Philistine-controlled territory. That is right down the Jezreel Valley where the Battle of Gilboa was fought. They probably still controlled that. And Abner has, I'm going to get into this later, but he's probably spent some time here trying to push back the Philistines. And Abner has a pretty weak army at this point. We'll see that in a moment. But that's the territory. I'll have them leave that up there for us as we continue to talk here. But just get a feel for that. That's where David ruled this time, and where Ishbosheth ruled. For Abner to do this was a defiant act against God's will. Abner could literally quote God's directives previously. He's going to do this in chapter 3 and verse 9 and chapter 3 verses 17 and 18. Abner says, later on, he says, I'm going to do for David as the Lord has sworn to him. Abner says that later on. I'm going to do for David as the Lord has sworn for him to do. In verse 17 of chapter 3, he says to the king, to the elders of Israel, he says, in time past you were seeking for David to be king over you. Now then do it, for the Lord has spoken to David, saying, by the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and the hand of all their enemies. Getting ahead of the story a little bit here, but Abner eventually is going to turn the kingdom over to David, and he's going to say, listen, the Lord has already said that David's going to rule over us, so let's make him king. You have a question in your mind right now? Why is Abner making Ishbosheth king right now? Abner seems to be hungry for power. But he doesn't seem to be hungry for the throne itself, because Ishbosheth is a weak man. He is recorded, this is sort of actually funny, he is recorded to have done only 3 things in his 2-year reign. Commentary pointed this out. Number 1, he returned his sister Michal to David as his wife. Number 2, He accused his most ardent supporter of trying to take over the throne. That sounds oddly familiar, doesn't it? He accuses Abner, actually, of trying to take over his throne, much like his father did with David. And then the third thing that he did was he laid on his bed. He laid on his bed at noontime. He was laying on his bed, and that's when they killed him. That's the work of Ishbosheth. He's a very weak man. Abner, though, is the strongest man in the kingdom, and he is about to come into conflict with another very exceptional leader, and that man is Joab. And we see here the second conflict coming here, verse 12. Now Abner the son of Ner and the servants of Ishbosheth the son of Saul went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon, and Joab the son of Zeruiah and the servants of David went out and met them by the pool of Gibeon. So they sat down, one on one side of the pool and the other on the other side of the pool. Then Abner said to Joab, "Let the young men now arise and compete before us." And Joab said, "Let them arise." As we get into the life of Joab, you're going to see that Joab was fiercely loyal to David's cause as long as it served his own cause. He's fiercely loyal to David's cause as long as it serves his own cause. This is really our first introduction to Joab. We see his name mentioned in 1 Samuel 26 and verse 6, but it's just in passing. Here he begins to take center stage. He's the son of Zeruiah, and Zeruiah is David's sister. So that would make him David's nephew. He's taken a position. Think of the position that Joab is in. Again, first time we really see Joab in action here. We're not told that he was in action earlier. Who led David's mighty men, 600 men all over the wilderness and stuff? That was David, right? They have a new leader now. He's taken this position as the leader of the servants of David. That is saying something. His boldness and nerve rivals that of David. David commanded these men before. Now Joab is commanding them. And he meets this advancing army. It says Abner, the son of Ner, and servants of Ishbosheth. And it says that there's men there that compete. They're having this challenge. And there are armies there as well. They get into a battle. So it's an army that's coming down. And Joab meets them before they cross into the boundary of David's territory. And they meet around this pool of Gibeon. This is a picture of the pool of Gibeon today. And it is carved down into the earth there. I forget how many feet down it is, but it's a deep pool. And they met around this pool. And there is evidently a disagreement between the two parties. They weren't meeting, for a picnic or anything. They were coming together, and they were going to face one another. There's a disagreement here, probably of territories and different things. Abner suggests that they settle this in a duel. And he says, "Let the young men now arise and compete before us." Joab agrees, let them arise. And we see here that 12 men get up. And these 12 guys are evidently evenly matched. And they fight one another. They all draw their daggers, and they literally just cancel each other out. The 24 guys go down there and they kill one another. There's a battle after this that ensues, and Joab and David's smaller army completely rout Abner's men. It says something for these men. I cannot stop saying this. David's mighty men are mighty men. They are facing Abner's host here. They have 19 men lost in this battle. Abner loses 360 men. That is quite a rout for Abner's force here. Joab was not the only fierce fighter, though. We see his brother. He has two brothers, Abishai and Asahel. And Asahel, it says, is as fleet of foot as a deer. And he's a runner. He has incredible stamina. And he chases after Abner. So much so that it begins to annoy Abner. Abner's having to constantly dodge and having to constantly maneuver out of this guy's way. He's trying to kill Abner. And he's chasing, he's just fearless, running after this this general, probably Abner, I would imagine, would be on horseback or something like this, and yet Asahel is able to keep up. He is an incredible athlete and chasing after Abner. Abner offers him, says, hey, take one of these guys, take their armor and go home. Just get out of here, And trying to say, listen, you can't kill me. I'm not going to let you kill me. But Asahel does not listen. And at one point, Abner is forced to actually repel a charge from Asahel. He takes what he thinks will just give him a good stun, and he takes the butt end of his spear, and he holds it up against Asahel to try to hold Asahel back from killing him. Asahel is charging so hard and so fast that the butt end of the spear actually kills Asahel. And Asahel goes down, and people just stop and they look. And Abner now has killed Asahel. Would you say that Abner is guilty of murder? The way I just described it. If there ever was a case for manslaughter, there's a case for manslaughter. Okay, butt end of the spear. If you want to kill the guy, flip it around, and now you've got problems. But butt end of the spear, just get back. Trying to push the guy back. Asahel is running so fast. Abner pushes the butt end of the spear, kills Asahel. Before he kills him, I missed this portion in verse 22. Notice what Abner says. Turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then could I face your brother Joab? How could I face your brother Joab? Abner respected Joab's ability, feared Joab's ability. They continue to fight. Joab doesn't realize that his brother is killed, but they continue to fight. Verse 24, Joab and Abishai also pursued Abner, and the sun was going down when they came to the hill of Ammah, which is before Giah, by the road to the wilderness of Gibeon. Now the children of Benjamin gathered together behind Abner and became a unit and took their stand on top of a hill. Then Abner called to Joab and said, shall the sword devour forever? Do you not know that it will be bitter in the latter end? How long will it be then until you tell the people to return from pursuing their brethren? Joab finally calls off the people. They stop chasing them. And Abner beats a hasty retreat back to the capital city there of Mahanaim across the Jordan River. They cross the Jordan that night. Joab returns to his place. And it says in chapter 3, verse 1, that a long civil war follows. And it says that the house of Saul got weaker and weaker, and the house of David got stronger and stronger. This war follows. 1 Chronicles 10 tells us of David's growing army from all the tribes of Israel. I believe that during this time, the tribes of Israel begin to realize that David is going to rule, and they begin to matriculate to him. They begin to migrate down to Judah, and they join David's cause down there. Saul's cause is getting weaker and weaker. David reigns for 7 years and 6 months in Hebron. Ishbosheth only reigns 2 years in Mahanaim. Why doesn't it match up? It seems like Abner crowned Ishbosheth toward the end of David's reign in Hebron. So David goes up after the battle at Gibeon or Gilboa, and he is crowned king there. He reigns for some time. In the meantime, there's no king over the northern tribes for several years until Abner crowns Ishbosheth in defiance of David's rights. We believe that perhaps Abner was still trying to regain stability for years after the Philistine triumph there at Mount Gilboa. So there's civil war. During this time, though, chapter 3, verses 2 through 5, you have David's family growing. We won't read these verses, but David's family grows. You can read all of his sons that are born. 6 sons from 6 different women, 6 different wives. David's family grew by 6 different wives. And here we begin to see David's political side. Some of these marriages were political. This lady, Maacah, was Talmai's daughter, and Talmai was a king east of the Jordan River and north of Ishbosheth. David is trying to unite these tribes. He's trying to gain some stability here, and that was a way that you gained stability. You would become family with the king of the foreign tribe. You would marry his daughter, and it was a way of establishing an alliance there. And so kings would typically have multiple wives in these days. You have a problem with that? Yeah, we have a problem with that. David gravitated toward the politically expedient. Could the Lord have given David the kingdom without all these marriages? Certainly could have. And you'll find these marriages greatly complicated David's later life. You got the oldest son here. Oldest was Amnon. And then you've got Absalom. You recognized Absalom. Adonijah is another one that we recognize. These men were to be great problems later on in David's life, these sons. And the question is, you look at David and we think, well, he's a man after God's own heart. And here's David's human side, okay? There's no divine side of David. I'm just saying, here's David's not so pleasant side. David is gravitating toward the politically expedient. Now, none of us, I'm going to insert thankfully, are in politics right now. I'm not against being in politics. We need more people involved in politics, but I think you could understand why I say thankfully. It's a messy world out there. But politicians are known for what? Many different things, but the politically expedient. They have to be politically correct. It's fascinating to watch what one politician says and then what he does. And it's just constant. And the hope every election cycle is here's another politician, here's another, conservative, guy, and he says one thing, let's hope he does it, okay? And here's a conservative politician, now we're eventually disappointed because he doesn't back up what he says. David gravitates toward the politically expedient. He's a politician. And he does what is practical. He does what is pragmatic. He would say in his defense at this point in his life, probably, this is what we do. I need to gain stability in this area. I need to gain stability in this kingdom. And yet the Lord, I don't believe, was pleased by David's multiple marriages. And the question here is the Lord pointing to anything in your life that you think is helping your cause? I mean, David thought this helps his cause. I mean, this is what kings do. I need to marry, these different women to make these different alliances. Is there something in your life that the Lord is pointing out that you think is helping your cause but is actually hurting your cause? Actually hurting your cause. Have you ever seen the videos of people trying to fly before the Wright brothers? You ever seen these little clips of people? My favorite, I almost put it on here, is the one of the guy that literally has, it's huge monstrosity of a thing that is obviously weighs more than he does. And he's running across the field and he comes to this little tiny rock. Just like little, and you can see the hope in his frame as he just hops over the rock like, surely this thing's going to carry. And it just, he almost falls over at that point. Then he comes to probably a 6 to 8 foot rock, and he's got this monstrosity of a thing on top of him, and he hopefully jumps off of this rock, and the thing just crushes him. Just like splat on the ground. And I thought to myself, it's probably safer to jump off that rock without that, okay, and hope to fly, than it is to jump with that. That thing that he thought would help him to fly is actually, the thing that probably gave him a broken collarbone. And he thought it was helpful, but it was the opposite. In our lives, we think of the things that we're carrying around and we think, I need this. I can fly with this. And God's saying, no, you can't. That's going to kill you. That's going to ruin your life. Can you imagine the Lord saying to you in heaven, I could have done so much more through your life if you had only stopped blank at age blank. If you had just given this up at age such and such, I could have done so much more through your life. I believe the Lord would have done so much more through David's life. We're going to see this over and over in his life. He does the politically expedient thing. We're going to see it before the message is over again here. Psalm 62:5, David wrote, "My soul waits silently for God alone, for my expectation is from Him." What is it in your life, in my life, that we view as expedient, that is needed, but is actually hurting our cause? That was the second stepping stone David had to use, civil war. The third stepping stone here is conspiracy. Conspiracy. Abner conspired against Ishbosheth. You have here in verse 7 of chapter 3, Ishbosheth accusing Abner of impropriety, of actual immorality with Saul's concubine. And to make a long story short, to do that in that day was really a claim at the throne. To commit immorality with one of the king's wives was to claim the throne. And Ishbosheth accuses Abner of this. We're not told that Abner actually did this. In fact, Abner actually turned the kingdom over to David, who was a stronger leader than Ishbosheth, so I don't think he was interested in the throne. But Abner is outraged at this, and he says to Ishbosheth, "Am I a dog's head?" Verse 8. "Am I a dog's head that belongs to Judah? Today I show loyalty to the house of Saul your father, to his brothers and to his friends, and have not delivered you into the hand of David. And you charge me today with a fault concerning this woman? May God do so to Abner and more also, if I do not do for David as the Lord has sworn to him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan to Beersheba." And Abner scares Ishbosheth, who doesn't answer him another word. You notice that Abner knew that the Lord had appointed David as Saul's successor. Abner goes to David, verse 12. Now we're starting to see things turn around again, right? I mean, you've got this man who's coming to David, and he says in verse 12, "Whose is the land?" Saying also, "Make your covenant with me." The literal sense here is cut a covenant with me. That reminds you of something. Cut a covenant. We say today, cut a what? Cut a deal. Make me a deal. Okay? "Make your covenant with me, and indeed my hand shall be with you to bring all Israel to you." Now we're talking. David's moving along here. All right? Abner is conspiring against Ishbosheth. That is the hardest name in the world to say, I think. Ishbosheth. And he is probably making some great provisions for himself when he cuts this covenant with David. He probably wants a high-ranking position, probably in David's army. David agrees to his terms. He says, though, to Abner, he says, "You shall not see my face," verse 13, "unless you bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see my face." So David has 6 wives, and he says, "Bring my 7th." She was his first wife. She had been married to another man. And he says, "Bring her to me." And her husband at that point, who is married to her, who Saul gave her to, goes along behind her weeping. And Abner says to him, "Go, return." And he returned, verse 16. David demands Michal's return, probably to strengthen his claim to the throne. Again, political expedience. And Abner fulfills this. Ishbosheth fulfills this. And David's terms are met. They begin to communicate. Verse 17, Abner communicates with the elders of Israel. And he says, "In time past you were seeking for David to be king over you. Now then, do it." And he gathers these people, and he begins to swing this entire nation over to David. And David makes a feast for Abner, verse 20 and 21. And Abner agrees to call all Israel to the coronation. Verse 21, "Then Abner said to David, I will arise and go and gather all Israel to my lord the king, that he may make a covenant with you. They may make a covenant with you, and that you may reign over all that your heart desires." So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Sounds decent, right? Abner, though, had just stepped in front of a speeding freight train. And the speeding freight train that Abner just stepped in front of, his name is Joab. And Joab has ambitions that are stronger than Abner's. And we see here, secondly, Joab conspired against Abner. You talk about disaster. Like, this is, as you read this, you've got the kingdom beginning to swing to David, and then his very general is the one who's going to make it all go haywire once again. Joab conspires against Abner. He returns from a raid and learns what Abner had done. And Joab boldly rebukes David. He says to David, literally, "What have you done?" Can you imagine saying that to the king? Your uncle, no less. Joab is audacious, and he gets away with it. He quickly summons Abner back, and he tells him, "I need to speak with you further." He calls him back to Hebron. Verse 26, when Joab had gone from David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, who brought him back from the well of Sirah. But David did not know it. Now when Abner had returned to Hebron, what's Hebron again? Place of refuge. Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him privately, and there stabbed him in the stomach, so that he died for the blood of Asahel his brother. Verse 30, so Joab and Abishai his brother killed Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel at Gibeon in the battle. Here's Abner, who's guilty of manslaughter. He's in a city of refuge. He's lied to and then stabbed mercilessly without any hearing whatsoever. You talk about a royal mess. Joab conspires against him and kills him. What's that going to look like for David's cause? We see here next that David's mourning for Abner revealed his innocence. David curses Joab and his descendants. He says that it needs to rest on the head of Joab. He says, I'm guiltless before the Lord. Verse 28, before the Lord forever of the blood of Abner the son of Ner. Let it rest on the head of Joab and all of his father's house. David also in verse 31 he commands Joab and his men to tear their clothes and mourn for Abner. He follows Abner's coffin to the grave. This is a rare public show of humility for a king. Then he composes this lament for Abner, verse 33 and 34. And he fasted for Abner, verse 35. They come to him and say, "King, O king, eat." He says, "I'm not eating until the sun goes down." Look at verse 36. Very significant. We're really motoring through this. Verse 36, now all the people took note of it. And it pleased them, since whatever the king did pleased all the people. For all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's intent to kill Abner the son of Ner. And then one of the most significant verses that we'll read tonight, verse 38. Then the king said to his servants, "Do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel?" Next verse. "And I am weak today, though anointed king. And these men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too harsh for me. The Lord shall repay the evildoer according to his wickedness." Here you have David hiding behind his own political weakness. Now, to be fair, has David a lot of political allies right now? No, he's got a very, very shaky hold here on the kingdom. But what would you think should be done to Joab? Any thoughts? Almost done here. What do you think should be done with Joab? Okay, here's a murderer. I mean, flat out, stone cold murderer of a man who had come to a city of refuge, thought himself safe probably because he's in a city of refuge, had the king's blessing. He's murdered. David laments this publicly, but he does not depose Joab. For him to depose Joab would not work politically, but it was still the right thing to do. You've got Psalm 101 that David wrote during this time. Psalm 101, we don't have time to turn there, is the psalm where David says, "I will set no wicked thing before my eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave to me." There are a couple more verses I just want to read to you that David wrote in Psalm 101. He says, verse 5, "Whoever secretly slanders his neighbor, him I will destroy. The one who has a haughty look and a proud heart, him I will not endure. My eyes shall be on the faithful of the land, that they may dwell with me. He who walks in a perfect way, he shall serve me. He who works deceit shall not dwell within my house. He who tells lies shall not continue in my presence. Early I will destroy all the wicked of the land, that I may cut off all the evildoers from the city of the Lord. And yet Joab continued for years until after David's death. David actually tells Solomon, go kill Joab, because he couldn't do it. Real quick, what conviction from the Lord do you need to follow through with that the Lord has said, this is wrong? This is not convenient for you to follow. This is not convenient for you to do, but this is the right thing to do. This is the right step to take. And we've not taken it perhaps for political expediency, for personal expediency. Very, very searching question. You have very quickly here at the end another conspiracy then after Joab's conspiracy against Abner. We have these two men, Rehab and Baanah, that conspire against Ishbosheth. They kill Ishbosheth thinking that they're doing the king a favor, and they did not do the king a favor, and he executes them. What must David have felt as these people killed one another off? What must he have thought? You know, there's conspiracy after conspiracy after conspiracy after assassination going on. Can God work His will even in the midst of conspiracies? Okay? The title of our message tonight, Stepping Stones. A heartache here is just a stepping stone along a road that's winding always upward. If you're following the Lord, there are no missteps. God makes no mistakes. Can God work His will even in the midst of conspiracies? Certainly He can. Let me ask you, you go ahead and apply it to our day in United States of America today, 2023, heading into 2024. Can God work His will even in the midst of conspiracies? Can He? He can. He can, and He will. We as His church need to believe that. The thunderstorm brewing appears at first to ruin David's future. But at the end, when the clouds part, we're in 2 Samuel. We're on the edge of Samuel 4. I know we didn't read anything there, but that's the account of Ishbosheth being murdered. And we hurried through that. But look at chapter 5, verse 1. Then all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and spoke, indeed, you're our bones and our flesh. We want to make you king. Did God get His work done? He did. Psalm 37:23, the steps of a good man are ordered, established by the Lord. Mark the blameless man and observe the upright, for the future of that man is peace. My heart can sing when I pause to remember. A heartache here is but a stepping stone along a trail that's winding always upward. This troubled world is not my final home. What stepping stones are you meeting tonight, this week? Have you treasured up the memories of the good ones for the ones that don't make sense? Are you confident in a God who can work His will in the midst of conspiracy, literal conspiracies in your life? I mean, you read about them all over the place. Conspiracies in our nation, conspiracies. And some of them, true, some of them maybe not true, but conspiracies. And we get all torn up about the news and about what's going on in America, and everything is terrible. But can God work His will in conspiracies? He's done it before, and He'll do it again. All we need to do is trust Him, because there are no missteps for a person that's following God. Let's pray. Lord, thank You for Your faithfulness to Your word, faithfulness to us. Lord, may we truly trust in You and take these steps that You reveal to us. Lord, be they where it seems that we are just immensely blessed, coronated as king, as it were, as queen, or civil war, or conspiracy, Lord, where things do not make any sense. Lord, would You give us a trust in You? Keep us, Lord, from doing things that are expedient, that are that may be pragmatic and work for us, but they are sin in your eyes. They contradict your word. Lord, keep us faithful to you, no matter what stepping stone you bring us to. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.